Someone, just come out, please. I can't even bury my daughter.
In April of 2000, Ricky, the husband of 22-year-old Sparkle Rye, came home from work that evening, but he would immediately dial 911 with a horrifying story. He said he had found his wife lying in a pool of blood. There was a vacuum cleaner cord wrapped around her neck. What was more chilling was that she had been stabbed over and over again. Just a few feet away was the couple's 5-month-old. She was alive, physically unharmed. That image is difficult to shake. A baby who had spent hours beside her mother's body, too young to understand that her world had changed forever. Naturally, suspicion fell on the one person closest to her, her husband. But after hours of questioning and checking his alibi, detectives couldn't make the evidence point to Ricky. After 4 years, one unexpected witness walked into a police station and told investigators something that completely changed the direction of the case. She had been present the day Sparkle had been murdered. What she described wasn't just murder, it was murder for hire. And the person accused of setting it all in motion wasn't a stranger. It was Sparkle's own father-in-law. Before we get there, though, you have to understand who Sparkle was, because reducing her story to the way she died would miss the person her family still remembers. Sparkle Michelle Rye was born on March 23, 1978, and grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. She lived with her father, Bennett, and her younger sister, Keisha. Years later, when Sparkle was 16, her father married a woman named Donna Lowry, who brought a young daughter into the family. However, many blended families don't always blend easily. Teenagers can be protective of their routines, and step-parents often have to earn trust one day at a time. But according to Donna, none of that happened here. Instead, the family came together naturally. Sparkle and her sister welcomed Donna, and before long, Donna considered both girls her own daughters. Her younger daughter looked up to Sparkle, who quickly became the kind of older sister every child hopes to have. Those closest to Sparkle remembered someone who was outgoing, caring, and full of life. In high school, she was a cheerleader. She earned good grades and eventually received a college scholarship to study accounting. It looked like everything was falling into place. But life doesn't always move in straight lines. Like many young adults experiencing freedom for the first time, Sparkle became distracted. School slowly took a back seat, and her social life was in the driver's seat, and eventually her grades slipped enough that she lost her scholarship. Her stepmother, Donna Lowry, recalled saying, "It's that age where they think they're ready to grow up." She had spent 2 years at college alone and wasn't ready to return home. For many families, that phone call would have been devastating. When Sparkle told her parents what had happened, they were disappointed. They weren't angry because she had failed. They were disappointed because they knew what she was capable of. Still, they didn't stop supporting her. Sometimes people lose their way at 18 or 19 years old. That doesn't mean they've lost their future. Bennett simply told his daughter that if she came back home, she would need to find a job and help contribute while she figured out her next steps. Sparkle appreciated the offer, but she wasn't ready to give up the independence she had already tasted. Instead, she decided to move to Louisville, Kentucky, where relatives had offered her a place to stay. She already had a job waiting for her at a local hotel, and in the summer of 1993, she packed her things and headed over there. It seemed like exactly what she needed. She worked at the front desk of a travel lodge, greeting guests, answering questions, and handling check-ins. It wasn't the accounting career she once imagined, but it gave her stability and the chance to build a life on her own terms. Then she met someone who would change everything. His name was Rajiv Rai, though everyone called him Ricky. He was only 18 years old, yet he managed the hotel because his father owned the business, and on paper, Sparkle was his employee. Before long, they would become much more than that. Their relationship developed quickly. Friends and family would later describe two young people who genuinely seemed to enjoy each other's company. They laughed easily, supported one another, and before long they had fallen deeply in love. But there was a problem. Actually, there were two. The first was obvious. Ricky was Sparkle's manager. The second was something much more complicated. Ricky came from an Indian family, and according to the information later shared by Sparkle and her relatives, he believed his parents would never accept him dating a black woman. Instead of confronting the issue immediately, Ricky tried to separate his worlds. He kept his relationship with Sparkle away from his family for as long as he could. He told her that he wasn't close with his parents, but it's unclear whether he fully explained the depth of their objections. Eventually, though, as secrets do, they always have a way of finding daylight. His parents learned about the relationship, and they were furious. They demanded that Ricky end things immediately, but he had refused. That decision to not end things with Sparkle would mark the beginning of a growing division between Ricky and his parents. Rather than choosing the future they wanted for him, he chose the woman he loved. At least, at the time, that's what everyone believed. When Sparkle came home to Atlanta for Christmas, she brought gifts for her family, including a designer handbag she proudly said Ricky had helped pick out. It was one of the first times her parents realized this wasn't just a workplace romance. This was serious. Naturally, Sparkle's parents had questions. Every parent does, when their daughter introduces someone new. Who was this man? What did he want with their daughter? Could he be trusted? But Sparkle reassured them. She told them Ricky treated her well, that he cared about her in ways that mattered. She admitted his family wasn't exactly thrilled about the relationship, but she brushed it off, describing him as the black sheep of the family. While his siblings had followed the path their parents laid out, Ricky had chosen differently. He had dropped out of college, a decision that had disappointed his father, a man who had once been a respected professor before moving into business. That choice set Ricky apart, and it created tension at home. Sparkle explained that Ricky's independence, his refusal to conform, was part of what drew her to him. He wasn't polished, he wasn't perfect, but he was real. To Sparkle's parents, the picture was complicated. On one hand, they saw a young man who had rejected the expectations of his family, who carried the weight of being the outsider. On the other, they saw someone their daughter believed in, someone she insisted treated her with kindness. And like many parents in that position, they had to decide whether to trust her instincts or keep questioning the man she had chosen. To Bennett and Donna, it sounded like a familiar family disagreement. Parents wanting one thing and their son wanting another. What they didn't yet understand was that this conflict wasn't simply about education, careers, or youthful rebellion. It was rooted in something much darker. And before long, that growing hostility would collide with another life-changing announcement that would make the situation impossible to ignore. Just a few months later, Sparkle called home with news that would change everyone's lives. She was pregnant. For Bennett and Donna, the timing wasn't ideal. Sparkle was still young, and Ricky was only 18. Neither of them had finished college, and both were just beginning to figure out what building a life together even looked like. Like so many parents in that position, Bennett and Donna worried. They worried about money, about stability, about whether their daughter and her boyfriend were ready for the responsibility that was about to land on their shoulders. But worry didn't outweigh love. Once the initial shock wore off, they stood behind their daughter. They knew the road ahead would be difficult, but they also knew Sparkle needed them more than ever. And in that moment, their role wasn't to judge or to scold, it was to support. Meanwhile, Sparkle couldn't have been happier. She was excited to become a mother, and by all accounts, Ricky shared that excitement. Whatever uncertainty existed about their future, one thing seemed certain. They wanted to raise this baby together. However, Ricky's parents reacted very differently. According to those closest to Sparkle, they were very angry. The disapproval they had, which had already been boiling under the surface, only got worse after they learned that the couple was expecting a child. Still, Ricky refused to walk away. In May 1999, the young couple made a decision. They decided to move back to Georgia so they could be closer to Sparkle's family. It was a fresh start, and for the first time, Bennett and Donna finally met the young man their daughter had been talking about, and the impression he left surprised them. He wasn't cold or disrespectful. He was quite the opposite. They watched him pull out chairs for Sparkle, check on her constantly, and make sure she was comfortable throughout her pregnancy. He seemed attentive, polite, and deeply committed to both her and their unborn daughter. Little by little, any doubts they had about him began to fade. If Ricky's own family refused to embrace them, Sparkle's family would. The couple eventually settled in Columbus, Georgia, where Bennett's cousin helped Ricky find a job. Life wasn't glamorous, but felt like it was moving in the right direction. Then, in October 1999, they welcomed a healthy baby girl. They named her Anala, a Hindu name meaning fiery one. For Bennett and Donna, watching Sparkle become a mother was one of the happiest chapters of her life. Donna even stayed with the young family for several days after the birth, trying to help them adjust. Instead, she found two parents who already seemed to know exactly what they were doing. Ricky changed diapers. He woke up for late-night feedings. To everyone on the outside, they looked like a young family figuring life out together. There was only one noticeable absence. Ricky's parents never came to meet their granddaughter. As time passed, Sparkle slowly began sharing more about what had been happening behind the scenes. She told her father that Ricky's parents had already chosen another woman they wanted him to marry. She confided in Donna that they had even offered her money, $10,000, to leave Ricky and disappear from his life. Think about that for a moment. They were not doing it because they believed she had done something wrong. Not because they questioned her character, but because they refused to accept her as part of their family. According to Sparkle, they blamed her for everything. They blamed her for Ricky dropping out of college. They blamed her for the distance between him and his parents, and the direction his life had taken. In their minds, she had become the problem. Yet none of the things they did worked. The relationship survived every obstacle placed in front of it. So Ricky and Sparkle decided to take the next step. They wanted to get married. They organized a small but intentional ceremony. There were no extravagant decorations or hundreds of guests. It was simply two young people promising to spend their lives together, surrounded by the people who had supported them from the beginning. On March 21, 2021, they became husband and wife. But what should have been one of the happiest days of their lives quickly became one of the strangest. As the wedding celebration continued, Bennett received a phone call from his cousin. At first, it didn't seem important. Then came one sentence that stopped him cold. Ricky's mother had called the family business looking for him. There was just one problem. According to Ricky, his mother was dead. In fact, he had told everyone that both of his parents had died just months earlier. He claimed his father had passed away from an illness, and that his mother had later died while visiting relatives overseas. Sparkle had cried with him. Her family had comforted him. They believed he had lost both parents within weeks of each other. Now they were learning that all of what he had told them was not true. Bennett didn't know what to think. He thought maybe there had been some misunderstanding. Maybe his cousin had spoken to someone else. But when he shared the information with Donna, they both reached the same conclusion. They needed to ask Ricky directly. They confronted him in front of Sparkle. At first, Ricky insisted there had been some mistake. He already told them his mother and father were dead. That was his story. Then Bennett explained exactly what his cousin had been told. There was a long silence. But, finally, Ricky admitted the truth. His parents were alive. Both of them. He had told them a lie. Imagine trying to process that in real time. It wasn't just a lie. It was a lie about the deaths of his own parents. A deception so weird that nobody in the room could understand why anyone would decide to do it. But this is where it gets weirder, because when Sparkle heard this, she was stunned. She asked him the obvious question on everyone's mind. Why? According to those who were there, he didn't have an answer, or at least, not one that made any sense. For Bennett and Donna, something changed that day. Up until then, they had viewed Ricky as a young man caught between two families. Someone trying to protect the woman he loved from parents who wouldn't approve. Now they realized there were pieces of his life they simply didn't understand. If someone could fabricate the deaths of both parents, what else could they be hiding? Sparkle was hurt in a way that was difficult to describe. Trust isn't usually destroyed all at once. It's chipped away, bit by bit. But sometimes, a single lie is so big that everything builds before it begins to be questioned. She packed a few things, took Anala, and went to stay with her parents. She needed space. She needed time to think. And for a while, it looked like their marriage might already be over, even before it started. Then, another decision would unknowingly set events into motion. Sparkle's aunt believed Ricky's parents deserved to know that the wedding had taken place, so she contacted them herself. As expected, when Ricky found out, he was furious. He called Sparkle, yelling over the phone, demanding to know why his family had been contacted. But from Sparkle's perspective, the secret was already gone. She knew his parents were alive, and now his parents knew they were married. Maybe, she hoped, there was finally no reason left to hide. Over the next week, the couple spoke every day. Despite everything that had happened, Sparkle still loved her husband, Ricky. More importantly, they now shared a daughter whose future depended on both of them. Eventually, she made a decision that worried everyone around her. She decided she wanted to go back home to Ricky. Bennett tried to change her mind. He couldn't understand how she could trust Ricky after such an unbelievable lie. But Sparkle believed marriages weren't supposed to end after the first major obstacle. She wanted to give him another chance. She believed they could move forward. She believed love was enough to overcome what had happened. Looking back now, that's the part that is perhaps the hardest to hear. Because just 4 weeks after returning home, Sparkle Rye would be dead. April 26, 2000, began like any other Wednesday. Ricky left for work that morning, while Sparkle stayed home with their 5-month-old daughter, Anala. From the outside, it looked as though the young couple had weathered the storm. The arguments over Ricky's lies had gradually begun to disappear. Sparkle had chosen forgiveness. She was trying to rebuild the trust that had been broken. Whatever future she imagined that morning, she would never get the chance to live it. When Ricky returned home that evening, he later told investigators that he walked into a nightmare. Sparkle was lying on the floor, covered in blood, and their daughter was only a few feet away. He called 911, then contacted Sparkle's parents. Donna would later remember Ricky crying over the phone, telling her she needed to get there immediately. At first, she assumed Sparkle had been injured. The possibility that her daughter was already gone never crossed her mind. By the time Bennett and Donna arrived, police vehicles had surrounded the apartment parking space. Crime scene tape stretched across the entrance. Officers moved in and out of the building. Then Bennett walked toward his wife. She asked him the question every parent hopes never to ask. Is she okay? He simply shook his head. No. Sparkle had been. The attack was horrible. Investigators determined that her neck had been tied with the cord from a vacuum cleaner, before being stabbed multiple times. The violence shocked even experienced detectives. This wasn't a robbery that had gone wrong. Nothing inside the apartment had been scattered. Her purse was still inside the home. There was even cash left untouched. Whoever entered that apartment had come for one reason: to kill Sparkle. But there was another detail detectives couldn't ignore. There were no signs of forced entry. That suggested Sparkle either knew the person standing at her door or trusted whoever they sent. Naturally, like in many cases like this, investigators' first focus was Ricky. Not simply because he was the husband. Statistically, spouses are often examined closely in cases involving intimate partner homicides. Add to that the big lie he'd told about his parents, and Bennett couldn't help wondering whether his instincts about his son-in-law had been right all along. Ricky was taken in for questioning, and it went on for hours. They asked what he did after finding Sparkle. He told detectives he had called out her name but didn't immediately rush to her side. Instead, he heard his daughter crying and turned his attention toward the baby. To investigators, that answer seemed unusual. Later, when asked why he hadn't immediately checked his wife, Ricky simply replied that he didn't know what to think at that moment. People process trauma differently. Shock doesn't always look the way we expect. Some people scream, some would collapse, others become strangely calm. Detectives found Ricky's demeanor unusual, but unusual isn't the same as guilty. More importantly, the evidence didn't point to him. His work schedule was verified. He had an alibi during the estimated time of the murder. There were no fingerprints, no DNA, and no physical evidence linking him to the attack. With nothing to hold him on, police had no choice but to release him. And then the investigation began to stall. Weeks became months. Months became years. The few pieces of physical evidence investigators recovered, a bloody shoe print and other trace evidence, couldn't identify a suspect. Every promising lead they had eventually reached a dead end. Sparkle's case quietly slipped into the growing stack of unsolved murders, for everyone except her family. While the world moved on from the loss, Bennett and Donna couldn't. They had buried their daughter. Now they were raising the little girl who had survived the attack. Donna later recalled that Anala barely cried immediately after the murder. It was almost as if the infant had withdrawn into herself. But as time passed, she began waking up screaming in the middle of the night. No one knows what memories remain with a 5-month-old. But grief leaves marks in ways we don't always understand. Meanwhile, Ricky also eventually left Georgia. He moved to Chicago. But before leaving, he had given custody of Anala to Bennett and Donna, telling them he couldn't provide the future she deserved. For a while, he still called. Then the calls became less frequent. Eventually, they stopped. He built a new life hundreds of miles away. He remarried. According to later reports, many of the people around him had no idea what had happened to his first wife, Sparkle. Back in Georgia, Bennett refused to let his daughter's name disappear. He even offered a reward for information, hoping someone, anyone, might know what had happened inside that apartment. For 4 years, no one came forward. Then everything changed because of an arrest that had nothing to do with Sparkle's case. In January 2004, a young woman was taken into custody after a police chase. While speaking with investigators, she made a surprising claim. She said she had witnessed Sparkle's murder. Detectives could hardly believe what they were hearing. According to her account, her cousin, Cleveland Clark, had asked her and another young woman to accompany him to an apartment complex. He had initially told them they were helping with a drug deal. Instead, he instructed the 2 women to knock on Sparkle's apartment door to see who was inside. They returned and reported seeing a young woman with a baby. Cleveland then gave them another instruction. He needed them to go back, knock again. And when Sparkle answers the door, they should ask to use the bathroom. But, this time, he followed directly behind them. When Sparkle opened the door, Cleveland forced his way inside. According to the witness, he asked one simple question: "Are you Sparkle?" When she had answered yes, he immediately began to attack her. The witness described a horrifying assault in which Cleveland strangled Sparkle with the vacuum cleaner cord before repeatedly stabbing her. Afterward, he warned both young women never to speak about what they had seen. Out of fear, they stayed silent for 4 years. But the witness's story didn't end there. She remembered stopping at a supermarket after the killing, where Cleveland had collected money through Western Union. The following day, she overheard him speaking on the phone. His message was brief: "It's done." That single detail became the breakthrough detectives desperately needed. They immediately tracked down the Western Union transfers. They found 3 payments. One was $400, the other $500, and the last $600. They were all sent by the same person, an elderly man in Mississippi named Willie Evans. Detectives brought in Willie for an interview. At first, he denied everything. But it wasn't long before his story began to change. Eventually, he agreed to meet investigators alongside another man named Herbert Green. Neither man appeared connected to Sparkle, but detectives dug deeper. Herbert Green had been a longtime friend and business associate of one person investigators already knew by name: Ricky's father, Chiman Rai. The same father Ricky had falsely claimed was dead. According to investigators, Herbert admitted that Ricky's father, Chiman Rai, had approached him before the murder and asked for help finding someone to kill his daughter-in-law. Herbert allegedly contacted Willie Evans, who in turn recruited Cleveland Clark. Clark reportedly agreed to carry out the killing in exchange for money, receiving an upfront payment before traveling to Georgia with Sparkle's address. Investigators still needed stronger evidence, so Herbert agreed to cooperate. Wearing a hidden recording device, he met with Chiman Rai and discussed the investigation. During that recorded conversation, Herbert suggested police were asking questions and implied they both faced serious legal trouble. According to investigators, Chiman's responses gave prosecutors enough confidence to move forward. In September 2000, he was arrested alongside the alleged intermediaries involved in arranging the murder. The prosecution argued that the motive was simple and deeply disturbing. They alleged Chiman Rai could not accept that his Indian son had married a black woman. According to prosecutors, every attempt to separate the couple had failed. The offers of money, the pressure, the marriage had gone forward anyway. So instead of accepting his son's decision, he allegedly decided to eliminate the woman he blamed for it all. Not everyone accepted that explanation. Some people pointed out that Chiman had taught mathematics at Alcorn State University, a historically black college in Mississippi. He had worked alongside black colleagues without controversy. He had later managed a supermarket in a predominantly black neighborhood of Jackson. Then in 1998, he also invested in a hotel in Louisville, Kentucky, then appointed Ricky as its general manager. But prosecutors argued that public relationships and private prejudice are not always the same thing. During the 8-day trial, attorneys painted sharply contrasting portraits of Rye. Prosecutors depicted him as a racist, alleging that he was so enraged by Ricky's marriage to Sparkle and the birth of their child that he paid $10,000 to have her killed. They also presented testimony from Cheeman Rye's former cellmate in the Fulton County Jail, who claimed Cheeman Rye referred to people as. Investigators also cited Ricky Rye's own statement that his father was a little racist. In response, defense attorneys portrayed Rye as a hard-working businessman who, while preferring his son to marry an Indian woman, was not racist. They brought forward numerous black customers and fellow inmates, each describing Cheeman Rye as tolerant and compassionate. In 2008, a jury convicted and sentenced 68-year-old Cheeman Rye to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For Bennett and Donna, the verdict brought justice, but it couldn't bring back their daughter, nor could it restore the childhood Anala lost before she was old enough to remember it. Sparkle's father, Bennett Rye, shared a bittersweet feeling after the sentencing. Through tears, he said, "I'm feeling very much relieved. I feel justice has been served for my granddaughter and for my family. My daughter's not going to come back, but she's smiling now."
Dr. J. Buzz von Ornsteiner, who I always call Dr. Buzz, who's a wonderful forensic psychologist. And Dr. Buzz, I'm going to start with you. Prosecutors say the Rye case was a murder for hire. So now let's take a look at some similar cases where defendants hired hitmen to do their killing for them. Back in 1987, Lita Sullivan was shot to death when she opened the door of her Atlanta townhouse for a stranger who was carrying pink roses. Her estranged husband, millionaire James Sullivan, was a suspect, but his alibi held up. 11 years later, a woman came forward with information that her former boyfriend, Tony Harwood, was the killer, and Harwood told jurors it was Sullivan who hired him to kill Lita. In another case of murder for hire, Atlanta prosecutor Fred Tokars was the defendant. In 1992, Tokar's wife was shot to death in front of her 2 little boys. Tokars was found guilty of her murder after a business associate admitted he was paid $5,000 to arrange the hit. And in 2002, New Jersey Rabbi Fred Newlander violated the commandment, "Thou shalt not kill," when he paid 2 conspirators, Len Genoff and Paul Daniels, $30,000 to murder his wife of 28 years. And, to Dr. Buzz, I have so many questions for you today. Okay. This whole idea, if we look at these cases, and I think it's a fair comment that the 3 cases which I've just looked at, Mr. Sullivan, then you have Mr. Tokars, a lawyer, then you have Mr. Newlander, a rabbi. Here, in this case, we have a college professor. So what is it, Buzz, about educated people that they won't dirty their hands, but they'll go hire someone?
I think it says something about us. I think we have a bias in this country, or as individuals, we label and we categorize very quickly. Our brains aren't perfect. We process information very, very quickly. And one of the things we have a bias about is that educated people are very good people. It's not necessarily true. What I see with these individuals are a real state of narcissism, a lot of grandiosity. They're in control. They seek positions where they can have control over people, and they mow everybody else down. They don't care about anybody else. It's all about them. And then when someone gets in their way, they don't take the steps to do it themselves. They want to get someone else to do their dirty work because they're above that. They're above everything else. It's all about them, and they see everyone else as an obstacle to their own grandiosity. That's how I see it, Ricky.
We think of you in terms of behavioral issues, but the truth is that although we won't deal with this necessarily knowing the psychology because you haven't met the defendant, but boy, oh boy, I think we can make some generalizations, starting with the fact of the prosecution's theory of the case. In essence, it's an honor killing, isn't it?
You know, it's fascinating, and I agree with you. This is a highly unusual case. When we talk about honor killings, or we talk about a parent and how they view their child, it's very, very involved, because obviously, if this individual did murder his son's wife, there obviously was a lot of shame and humiliation going on here. And he felt that his son had let him down, that his son not only had gone against his wishes, but shamed and humiliated him. And we know as psychologists, when we feel shamed or humiliated and we don't seek reasonable solutions, and those thoughts stay within our emotional brain over time, they tend to seep and they tend to ruminate, and they can lay the groundwork to these acting out, rage-fueled behaviors. It's how the father views his son, though, overall. Does he see his son as an individual, or does he only see his son as an extension of himself? I tend to think of these parents in general as they look at their children as trophies. They don't see the child as the individual. They only see the child as the extension of themselves. They're highly narcissistic individuals.
You know, it's interesting. I think perhaps for our viewers, the one easy comparison or basic comparison I can make is the stereotype of the stage mother, the gypsy, the stage mother who lives out her life through the accomplishments of her theatrical child in terms of the kind of transference in narcissism. I find it very intriguing. Dr. Buzz, it could be said that it's not the hatred of the young lady at all. It's, from where I sit, the purity of the son. No mixing of the races here. You will bring shame upon me and my family.
No, absolutely. I can see both points. And
yes.
I love your analogy of Mama Rose, where it's really the mother who wants to be on stage, but it's through the daughter that she can achieve that. Here we have a father, possibly, who only sees his children as a reflection of himself. He wants his children to go into the best schools. He wants his children to be a doctor or a lawyer. He wants his children to succeed because they only represent him as a narcissist. On the flip side of that, where does this leave the child? What kind of pressures does this place on the child, where they have a parent who only has tunnel vision and says, you need to go to school, you need to marry this type of woman, you need to act in this manner, or else you shame and humiliate me, and then I'm going to disown you. I kind of, again, think of them as viewing their children as trophies, or they're like a lawnmower parent who just mows down everything in their path so their child will succeed.
I'm just so intrigued with this. Dr. Buzz, watching this testimony, what insights do you have?
What comes to me first and foremost is how conflicted this son feels, and how we all would feel, and how usually we feel when we talk about our parents. All parents aren't perfect. We're not perfect. We have a mixture of emotions whenever we speak about our parents. And in this situation, when you have a father who's accused of murdering your wife, and you're still trying to follow the commands that your father is giving you. It seems to be so ingrained in this individual, in Ricky, it seems to be so ingrained that he should be in school, that he should be doing what his father wants, that he should be seeking a good degree, that he should not be dating. That's what's coming across to me, that there's this confliction here where he should be following what his father's directives are, and it's so ingrained in him. It's probably started from age 1 and on. He probably doesn't even realize how ingrained it is. But yet he's in love with this woman. He's married her. She's pregnant. She's had his child, and he can't even have a good relationship to inform his parents of it.
Very sad.
Yes.
It's really sad. When we look at the psychology of this young man, back to you, Dr. Buzz, I am fascinated by the fact that who is he protecting when they make a decision not to tell her family anything about his family? Who is he protecting himself? Is he protecting Sparkle? What's he doing?
You know, I've worked with countless men and women who've been rejected by their parents. I've also worked with parents who've rejected their children. It just makes it a heck of a lot easier, because you're always faced with these questions when people ask you about your parents. If you tell your parents that your parents have rejected them, rejected you, if you tell people that your parents disapprove of the marriage, that just brings up more questions. That just brings up more anxiety. That just brings up more stress. It's easier to say, my parents are dead, rather than try to bring up all this confliction and all this stress, all this anxiety, because of course people want their children to reconcile with their parents. We want to make everything right. So when you're telling people these stories, people want to know more information and they want to try to have a happy ending. It's much easier when children have been rejected or people have been annihilated by their parents, been disowned. They just want to say, it's over, they're dead, they're out of my life. It makes it easier on them, and unfortunately, it doesn't provide any real good solutions.
No, to say the least, and your insights are just fabulous. Dr. Buzz, so when the son testifies now, do you think, watching him, that he believes his father did not do this?
You know, yes, I do. He reconciled with his father, and again, it seems to be ingrained in him that this is what he must do. We know his brothers and sisters all went up the ladder to achieve great success through education and employment. He seems to be almost like the black sheep of the family. And the father really did not like that. But yet, when the wife is murdered, the father's saying, come back, join our family again. I accept you, but I accept you on these terms. I want you to finish your education and make something of yourself. That's what I'm saying.
Well, I got to tell you, Dr. Buzz, this is a commitment. As often as I ask for Paul Bautista, I am asking for you. This is a very good educational segment for me, as well as an entertaining.
In 2009, Cleveland Clark, the man who carried out the murder, was convicted and given the death penalty. Other accomplices were also charged. The case didn't end there. Cleveland Clark's lawyers fought his sentence, arguing he had intellectual disabilities that should exempt him from execution. Finally, the courts agreed. Cleveland Clark's death sentence was overturned, and he was resentenced to life without parole plus 25 years. That means he'll never walk free again. When Sparkle and Ricky first met at a hotel in Louisville, they couldn't have imagined where their story would end. Two young people fell in love. They welcomed a daughter into the world. And yet, according to prosecutors and the evidence presented at trial, that love became the very reason someone wanted Sparkle dead. This story isn't only about violence. It's about what can happen when prejudice grows into obsession, because hatred rarely stays an opinion. When it's allowed to take root, it can reshape families, destroy lives, and leave innocent children paying the highest price. My condolence to the family and friends of Sparkle Rye.